Are college athletes getting a raw deal from the institutions they represent? Welcome to Deep Dive. I'm James Freeman of the Wall Street Journal. We're less than 2 weeks away from March Madness, when the NCAA and the collegiate athletic departments it protects will stage a highly entertaining and highly lucrative basketball tournament. Should more madness money make its way to the players? Joining us to answer that question, Jack Brewer, former college and NFL football player and founder and CEO of the Brewer Group. Also with us, Lou Mayone, the president and co-founder of Sports Grid, as well as Fantasy Sports Network CEO and co-founder, and Clay Travis of Fox Sports, who is the author of Republicans Buy Sneakers Too: How the Left is Ruining Sports with Politics. Thanks to all of you for being here. I'm going to try not to ruin this sporting event with politics, but it is a question here. Obviously, a very lucrative enterprise for the NCAA and the colleges affiliated with it. I think it's more than $1 billion a year that the NCAA is now collecting from its various broadcast partners to put on the NCAA tournament. And Jack, this is an issue. You've studied not just as a player, a practitioner in the field, but 20 years ago, you wrote a paper arguing that college athletes ought to be paid.
Yes, I did. I wrote my dissertation on this, and it's been something that's been obviously near and dear to my heart because, you know, I played college sports at a time when we could only make $2,500 a year. I had 2 kids in college that I was supporting. And so for a college athlete, and that, you know, I was a 3.9 GPA, a master's degree student, I felt like I should have the opportunity to earn an income. And so that's why I poured so many resources into that. And so, you know, my stance on the topic is, you know, it is a business, but allow the athletes to also be entrepreneurs. Mm-hmm. I think there are limits to that, but it's un-American not to let an athlete, someone that's 18 years old, 19 years old, 20 years old, not to earn an income. I think that's when you've crossed the line. Okay, now we should say, as you talk about how it's evolved in terms of paying athletes, while it's not a professional contract relationship, as college has gotten more expensive, as the amenities have gotten more generous, the in-kind or the value of what people are getting if they don't have to pay for college and may get a stipend on top of that is now quite significant. I mean, it's really kind of a misnomer to say they're not being paid now, isn't it? I agree. Today is a lot different. I have, you know, a couple of young men that I'm really close with, that I mentor, that are playing college ball, major college ball right now. And, you know, you go on their campuses, they're doing a little bit different than when we were doing. That's right. You know, these guys are getting grocery stipends where they can have groceries every semester. They still get their 3 meals a day. Right. In addition to that, you know, if they're from a lower income family, they can get their Pell Grants and other student aid, which can equal almost up to $10,000 a year. And so you see these guys driving new cars on campus when we had to hustle to get those. So. Okay, but Lou, while it is a better deal than it used to be, maybe, it's still a very small percentage of that $1 billion plus a year that the NCAA is taking in from its broadcast partners and I guess cablecast, et cetera. So what is the argument for not compensating the players something closer to that? Maybe they don't get the full $1 billion, but obviously there's an argument they're generating a lot more value than they're getting back.
Yeah, well, I think the argument starts with the student needs to be a student. I think education is first. They go there to play. You know, in a way where I say to myself, the NCAA is a nonprofit organization, right? And yes, the college and the institution, I mean, it's structured legally as a nonprofit, but this is a highly lucrative enterprise. It's a nonprofit organization, and then your college, the institutions are there to make money, but at the end of the day, these kids are there to go to school. That's secondary. Playing is secondary. And I believe that, to your point, you know, back in your day, different story. We're talking about today. These kids are paid in a way, education, they get a great education, they get great coaching. They get to hone their skills for those 4 years. Let's make no mistake about it. And they get the national exposure to help build that brand I say, because that brand is built. And if they do move on to the NBA or the NFL or professional sports, that's where they're going to get paid. And I'm going to tell you this, if they go directly from high school, even if they sit out, different rules for different leagues. But at the end of the day, if they go, they're not going to get the big bucks. If they go to Duke and they get that training and that coaching and the facilities and all the things that come with that and national exposure, they're going to get paid in a bigger way down the road that makes up for a little bit of money that they're losing.
Okay, so I think you're saying they're getting a pretty good deal now. And Clay, we should point out, if you want to think of this as a minor league, if you look at what minor league baseball players get paid, I think the NBA G League, these are not big contracts. It might be kind of similar to what the benefits are that these college athletes are getting now.
To me, this comes down to choice. Pay or play is an interesting debate, but to me, what should happen is 18-year-olds, I think this is a good point he made earlier, in America, we're okay with letting them walk around in a jungle with a gun and get shot at, right? Mm-hmm. We're okay with Taylor Swift being really good at releasing an album and making a lot of money. She doesn't have to go sing in the choral department at Vanderbilt for 3 years before she can release an album and let them make all the money off of her, right?
Yeah.
And so to me, on a fundamental American basis, I think it should come down to choice. And this really was crystallized for me covering college athletics, guys. I went down and watched Marcus Lattimore carry the ball 40 times for over 200 yards, put Florida out of that game, won at the Swamp, and advanced South Carolina to their only SEC championship game when he was playing for South Carolina. The next year he came back as a sophomore, he tore up one knee. Had to come back as a junior, tore up the other knee. I think that if you are 18 years old or 19 years old or at any point in time you have the ability to go pro, would have been a first-round pick after that first year.
Yeah.
You should have that opportunity. Same thing in the NBA. Look, LeBron James did pretty well coming straight from high school. Kobe Bryant did. Kevin Garnett did. Yes, there are failures as well, but people fail all the time in life. That's how markets are based. So I think much of this would go away from should college players be paid if the NBA let guys go straight from high school, and if the NFL didn't have a 3-year restriction, which is why the new XFL guys isn't going to have an age restriction. So if you decide you want to go pro in football, I think that will help in many ways also.
And I think to his point that the market will dictate where this goes from here, right? Every year, whether it's March Madness and all these big dollars are being thrown around, people will bring up this question. That's just the way our world works, right? But to your point, I think the market will fix this. How so? You just brought up the point where, hey, if you're 18, and I agree with you, you should be able to go and take the risk of moving into a professional position and not getting paid as much, not honing your skills and do all the things that I said. But here's the key. The key is when you look at this, at the end of the day, it's the choice of the player. It's the choice of that family to decide whether education is important to them or making the money.
Okay, well,
and that's the issue that I have, because I think, when you look at the entire landscape of what's going on, right? We focus on the outliers. Mm-hmm. If you go to the NFL or if you go to the NBA, you're an outlier, right? The majority of college players just don't get that opportunity. It's probably less than 1%.
It's actually a little bit more, but yeah,
2%, whatever it is.
Yeah.
The point is that we focus on these outliers, but really the guys that are hurt are the college athletes that are staying in school that really don't get a chance to pursue that degree that they normally would want to go after. I know for me, I was a great student, right? But I would have been a pre-law student going after my law degree had I not had to pour so much effort into football. And not that I'm blaming anyone for that, but I really feel with the billions of dollars being made, there should be trust established for athletes who either leave their school early, decide to go pro. That shouldn't mean that you just have to completely abandon your education if that's truly what the NCAA is representing. I think we talk out of kind of both sides of our mouth here because, we say that guys can choose education, but they really can't, not being a full-time student athlete.
Yeah, I'm really glad you brought that up because as we evaluate what the deal is, I think you see very few Division I athletes. My impression is very few in any sport are able to do that at a high level and also do a pre-med or one of the more rigorous majors. I mean, that whether it's explicit or...
He did it.
I think it also.
But I was a rarity, man. I can't.
You're the outlier.
No, I really was. I mean, I really poured my heart and soul into my education because I came from a family that no one else got a chance to go to school.
Sure.
So I looked at my scholarship and I said, I want to take as many courses, as many credits as I can if they're going to pay for it.
Okay.
So I take 18 credits in a semester.
To be fair, obviously there are people who are able to do it, and maybe I'm overstating it, but certainly you hear from athletes that have trouble fitting the academic schedule they want to pursue into the Division I practice, lifting, etc. schedule.
That's why I also think Major League Baseball gets this right a lot, because you can go pro at 18. You can negotiate, figure out what your worth is. If you don't like the value that you're getting, you go to college for 3 years. And as part of any contract you might sign if you go pro at 18, that team guarantees you that you can go to college and they will pay for it afterwards, which I think is paramount. The other thing about this, guys, that I think is key, and you're hitting on a big point here, I think, many of these athletes go to school and they don't actually get an education. Now, partly that's on the student athlete, right? Because they aren't as interested, they aren't as engaged. Men in particular, women tend to take advantage of the opportunities because the money out there is not as great. You know, if you're the #1 draft pick in the WNBA, you're making less than somebody who's coming out and going to work at an investment bank, right? So they aren't thinking this is going to be my, meal ticket for the rest of my life. So women tend to take advantage of those opportunities. I think men, I always was taught, and I think kids need to be taught now. I'm curious about you guys. Use the ball. Don't let the ball use you. Right. I think very often in college athletics, guys get used by the ball. And the coaches, they don't care because they want the guys to be eligible. So if you're going to go major in PE or something that you can't actually have any tangible physical ability to use once you get out, that's an indictment of the overall process.
I love what you're saying there because it does start with parents and coaches. Team fantasy, I coach these kids, and you can ask any one of them for all the years I've coached, 22 years. I say schools first.
Yep. Schools
first. Playing for me and playing and going on to high school and college and all those things are great. But there's only 2% of kids, 2%, that actually there's 7% of kids that go from high school to college. Division I is 2%. So think about that. Then from there, you have to participate in the college. Everybody comes together. Hard, great players are playing. Then it's what, 1% of those elite players? Let's get to that. Elite players go to the pro league.
Everybody thinks they're the exception.
Of course.
Right? Okay. And that's one of the challenges is explaining probability to 18-year-olds, because you guys are 18-year-old men. Is there a dumber person on the face of the earth that thinks he's a genius than an 18-year-old man? I don't think so. We all survived. I got 3 boys now. I'm terrified.
But if one of these 18-year-old guys, Lou, we talked about whether colleges ought to pay or how much they're paying, how we value that compensation. What about if there's an opportunity outside the field to get an endorsement deal? What is the argument against letting Marcus Lattimore
sell his autograph?
Endorse soda or milk or something before he goes to pro football, where he never ended up being able to have the same opportunity?
I've thought long and hard about that one. And the reason why I'm saying I don't think athletes, amateur athletes should be getting paid is because, at the end of the day, we discussed all of that, and we know the reasons why, but what you're saying there, I keep saying to myself, maybe there's a way that we can pay them for sneaker deals and maybe using their likeness. Maybe there's a way that we put it in a trust fund for when they get out. So I don't want to comment. I know, I don't want to muddy the water.
What business is it of ours, what they do with the money?
Well, here's the reasons why. So even though I feel that they shouldn't get paid, I do think there's a way, there's a hybrid here, using, letting them get out, making their decisions, and then maybe putting a trust fund for when they get out, because I really don't believe that you're an adult and you can handle the things that you need to handle from high school to college. I really firmly believe
you can believe
look at the statistics. I'm a statistics
not your
guy.
Money, right?
No, look at the statistics. NFL players, when they get out, how many of them were broke within the first 3 years?
By 75%.
Okay, so let's talk about it. I'm a statistics guy, so I look at the statistics.
But you can't say we're going to allow the market.
Spend their money well doesn't mean they shouldn't have the money, right? And so to me, when I remember when Johnny Manziel and Todd Gurley, 2 big-time college stars, Todd Gurley got suspended because he sold his own jersey and his cleats to somebody. Yeah. His own jersey and cleats. Johnny Manziel got in trouble for allegedly doing autographs. He said when he would walk into a classroom in College Station down in Texas A&M, kids would swarm him with different magazines, different 8x10s. Can you sign these? He would do it for free. They'd immediately put it on eBay with a picture of him doing it.
And
he couldn't make any money off of it.
I wasn't as good as Johnny Manziel in college, but I will say, to your point, right? If you look, I'm good friends with Ron Dane. I played with him at the Giants. I think he sold, University of Wisconsin sold over $11 million in Ron Dane jerseys on his Heisman run, right? He got none of that. I'm also good friends with Reggie Bush. And, as we all know, what happened with Reggie.
His family gets a better home,
I don't think he
and
should
he's
get
somehow
any of
not
it, though.
eligible. That's crazy.
He shouldn't get any of it, though.
It is. But I can't agree with that because in any other business in America, right, and it is a business because they're selling an actual physical jersey. In any other business in America, we would be outside protesting if they didn't allow the individual whose name and likeness is being used to actually get any benefit from that. And before I finish, think about the health concerns, right? Think about the injuries. Think about the concussions. Think about all these things that college athletes go through their 4-year of school. And you have no insurance for these guys later on in life. Or girls.
Well, you have medical insurance, but not their future wages aren't insured.
No, their future medical insurance, you're cut off when you leave school, right?
You're covered while you're there, but if at 40 you're having an injury from when you were a kid.
I had three surgeries. I had 3 surgeries when I was in college. I got arthritis from playing college ball. You think I can go to the NCAA and get any coverage or go get treatment? No. And that is un-American when they're making billions of dollars.
It's not un-American, guys.
Disagree.
We keep talking about the players and these amateur players. Let's talk about the schools for a second. It's a business. That school is they have to make money. There's other things that go on in that school besides football and college basketball. Guys, 10% of the colleges today, if there's 228 Division I college schools, 10% of them are in the black. So let's talk about this. We're saying it's un-American. It's not business. It is business. The school is the institution of the business. NCAA is, I don't care what anybody says, it's a nonprofit, and these kids are amateurs, and they can't get. Where are we going to draw the line? Guys, where are we going to draw the line?
The school doesn't allow you to take full advantage of your education. I would agree with you if I could go to the University of Minnesota.
I'll hire him right now.
No, if I go to the University of Minnesota right now and I go try to go into some classes, they're going to make me pay for it because my eligibility is out. What I'm saying is, I would agree with you if the universities really took on that logic and said, everyone I bring in here to play sports, I'm going to give you full access to pursue your education to the highest degree. They don't do that. Once you're done playing,
it's not perfect. It's not perfect. We can nitpick on these things. You can change those things. You can do that.
Okay, but this issue where you say the institutions aren't making money, it's because they use football and basketball revenue to fund lots of other sports.
And
I would say I don't think the football players are required to fund the swimming team.
I agree with you. And I think that goes to one of the internal flaws of logic here is it's not a market-based business, really, right? The only 2 college athlete systems, right, teams that have any value are men's basketball and football. They're the only 2 that ever produce profits. But under existing federal law, there have to be an equal number of women given scholarships as men. And so what ends up happening is a type of socialism where you take all the profit that exists from football and men's basketball and you roll it over to give scholarships to women's swimmers or men's track and field and all these other athletes who otherwise wouldn't be subsidized. So I think in order to create a market-based dynamic where guys get paid based on their talents, you would have to create 2 divergent paths in college. One would be a markets-based path, and I'm not sure if it's legal, but I think this is the way you'd have to construct it. One would be markets-based, and you could say, okay, these guys have a right to share in the revenue and profit that they produce. And the other one would be to take the non-revenue producing sports and treat them differently. Now, the challenge overall, I think, is would a court allow if suddenly all the men's football players are making $30,000 a year doing autograph signings, would they allow football team members to be treated differently there than women's soccer players who may not have anywhere near the same number of fans? I don't know that we know the answer, but that's the internal tension I think that exists is between your sort of a socialistic system and what I think most of us would appreciate, which is a capitalistic system.
It gets real muddy, guys. We're going down a path that it's just not. Again, I think the NCAA and what's going on there, it's a great product. Let's just go to that for a second. The product is unbelievable. I love college basketball. I love it. Why? Because these kids go out there and they play their hearts out every single second, every single minute on a big stage because they're doing it to what? Hopefully move on and get the job because of their education and their fame, right? And or move on to play in the pros. So what is wrong with that? Like, if somebody wants to come out, if the markets dictate that, hey, this is being done wrong, here's what I say to people. You don't have to invent a wheel. You can reinvent the wheel. Just spin the goddamn thing.
Okay.
Move over and spin it.
Okay, I want to ask you about the product because as a legal matter, obviously the NCAA has maintained that these athletes are primarily students, and that's how they were able to defeat the effort by Northwestern players to unionize and demand compensation. As we look at this product, I've wondered, forget whether someone deserves more or less than what they're getting. Do you kind of destroy the romance, maybe the illusion of college sports, if instead of an image of scrappy amateurs, you make it explicit these are professional athletes? I mean, we talked about how people don't buy a lot of tickets to minor league sports. If you made this explicitly a minor league, do you kill that product?
I don't think so in football. I think it already is. It already is because, again, you go to school, you have so many resources. We just went over the money. I think, but look at the big picture here. If you play professional football, right, that product is elite, right? College football does not compare to professional football. Trust me. The speed's different, the intensity's different. When you get paid to play ball, when you play football and you strap that helmet on, it's not like rowing in all these sports that Title IX's adding on to be able to make stuff equal, right? This is a different game. So I don't think that you're going to lose the quality, but I think what you're going to do is you're going to bring fairness and dignity to the people. And I can tell you this: if you started to at least partially pay college athletes, more of them will graduate.
Product's going to suffer.
Just to finish that, more of them will graduate because
they are at least getting enough compensation where if a guy has to make a decision, if you watch the NFL draft now, man, that's almost 70% of the kids are leaving, 75% of the kids are leaving with no degree. I have a problem with that. I run the largest post-secondary education program getting NFL players or NBAs in the country. And I do that for one reason, because I'm sick and tired of seeing guys leave the league and not be fully educated. And it's an issue, and they're doing it for money. They're leaving college football to pursue money and opportunity for their families, because most of them are from underserved communities.
Okay, so without that pressure,
I think people root in college athletics for the name on the front of the jersey, not the name on the back of the jersey, because the name on the back of the jersey is only going to be there for 3 or 4 years. And so as a result, I don't think there are that many people out there who are going to say, man, I used to love Alabama football, and then that guy got a Range Rover and lived in a better apartment, right? Like, I don't think people who are USC fans are like, man, I loved watching Reggie Bush on the field, but when I found out that his parents got a nicer house on the beach in California, I had a lot of difficulty watching him play. And what's crazy about this is it's an interesting point, because there are people who will argue that, and I see them every day in my Twitter mentions, and my question to you is always like, wait, you're a capitalist, right? Oh, yeah, I believe in capitalism. I mean, it's usually the free market guy who's like, well, you can't pay athletes, right? And I'm like, well, why do you believe in free markets in your own life? You don't do this for free.
For this question, it's not that I think it's wrong. I wonder if you're going to mess up the product.
So I agree with what he said, but it's going to mess up the product.
You're going to improve the product.
So if you go too far on commercialism, so instead of guys running out of the tunnel in Norman and it says Sooners, if it says Fly Emirates, that might change it. But just on the name of the back thing, they weren't buying generic Wisconsin jerseys. They were buying Ron Dane jerseys.
But they bought that number, and it didn't say Ron Dane's name on the back. And I would also say this. I do think this is where coaches come in. And we don't talk a lot about coaches. I think a lot of coaches fear control. And if you got guys with a lot of money, what happens all the time in pro sports? Guys who have a lot of money are able to stand out.
Not coming to practice.
So I do think
in trouble.
That would be something we need to worry about.
And that's where the product goes down.
But all of that, look what happens now. When a guy gets ready and he knows he can make money, he leaves school and he doesn't get his education. We talk about being educated, and you look, the proof is there. 75% of players are going into the league, even the ones that play 4 years. go to the league and they usually don't have their degree. So how can we sit here and think that if you give players extra resources where they're not as needy and they don't need to go and try to go to the league as early, why would that take away from the game?
Jack, that's a different question.
No, but that's a different question.
No, it's the same.
No, it's not. That's the responsibility of the student, the parents, and the institution.
Okay,
that has nothing to do with
saying
the
the quality of the players going to come down.
As you
That's
point
not
out,
true.
the NCAA is organized as a nonprofit institution. Colleges are organized as nonprofit institutions. They are given this tax-favored status because they tell us they are about the educational mission of young people. They don't say we're a business, but we're just organized this way. So if they
have these debates with everybody all the time. It's always the same thing. Listen, can you find a problem with anything going on in this country? Yes. We can go into politics. We can go into sports. Nothing is perfect.
No, but what
nothing
about?
No.
Yeah, but
wait,
why you
Here's
paying
my thing.
the coaches
So why don't we?
Okay,
so why don't we do this? Make the coaches more responsible and the assistants to get paid, and maybe bonuses should be put on top of them for their graduation of those students and what grades they're getting. There's simple fixes to some of these things you guys are talking about.
It is an interesting point.
So let's get together, let's debate, and let's try to make it better.
Right now, under NCAA rules,
thing or dismantle
to your point, for people who don't graduate, right now under NCAA rules, they consider you to be a good scholarship student if you leave on good academic standing. But you can leave in good academic standing, 60 hours left to get your degree, right? I do think if you started to count how many guys actually get their degrees as opposed to how many leave in good academic standing, that would be a good way to grow and make sure that somebody is getting an education to go along with the athletics, right? That would be something that I think the NCAA could look into.
Now, I guess I do need to ask you, we got a few minutes left here. Obviously, there are these periodic scandals where, and I don't know if you might look at it as just people trying to operate a market and the NCAA getting in the way, but occasionally we saw one, the FBI even, why this became an FBI issue is kind of nutty, but looking into ways people developed to urge and compensate people to encourage kids to go to particular schools, endorsement deals kind of in the loop in terms of helping that happen. I mean, do you look at this as just kind of the inevitable problems when you don't allow a market?
Yes. Black markets exist because free markets don't, right? I mean, that's the same reason we saw it back in the day in Prohibition with the alcohol and liquor. I mean, it wasn't like people couldn't get drinks. We see it now, especially with low-level drugs. I mean, that's why I've been legalize a lot more drugs, focus on the dangerous ones. I think we'd probably have more success there. It's why prostitution exists. It's why now, finally, the Supreme Court has said sports gambling can exist. But anytime you create a clear market-based system, right? These guys can have millions of dollars in value, but they're required to go to college. Why does it surprise people that somebody with a multi-million-dollar value would be reached out in a capitalistic-based society and we try to give them more of what their market value would be? So I think if you allowed them to make money, this is why I started off talking about, to me, the NBA and the NFL. We talk a lot about morality in sports. To me, it is immoral of both the NBA and the NFL to not allow 18-year-old adults to make a living in their league if they have the talents to do it. And I think that would help college.
All right, let's leave the prostitution and drug arguments for another day.
But two different ways.
Just to wrap it up here, 18-year-old, free market, why not let him sell his athletic services to the highest bidder?
Listen, I think the NBA is doing a great job in the NFL trying to push these kids to get an education. I think that's part of it, right? I also believe as a capitalist and somebody that believes in making money at 18 years old, I agree with you. Lou Mayon should be able, at 18 years old, and his 3 boys should be able to make the decision whether they're going this route or going to take the money. I'm hoping that my father, my mother, my wife and I talk to him and say, listen, you need to get an education. You need to be a well-rounded person. There's going to be things that you're going to learn and grow and get your skills are going to get hold on both sides of the equation. You need to go to school for those reasons. And guess what? If you do really well there, and God forbid you don't get hurt because there's tragedies in one else in every life and everything, if you go there and you do everything right and you learn both the sport and the scholarship part of it, you're going to get paid more. At the end of the day, in the professional world, as an accountant, and or playing professional football, basketball, baseball, hockey, rugby. That's what I think. And at the end of the day, if we want to blame Trump, we can do that too, and just end this discussion. How about that?
All right, Jack, we'll give you the final word. I don't know if you want to blame Trump for something or blame Lou. You can blame Lou. That's always an
I'm not
option.
blaming Trump. I'm thanking him for the economy, though.
Me too. But everybody else wants to blame him, right?
Yeah.
Everybody else going to blame him.
I played college sports with 2 kids. And I had to make decisions versus making money legally and illegally because the NCAA would not allow me to feed my 2 babies. And so I will always stand up for the athlete and his option to make a living. And I think if you look at what we're taking on as a society, we put these kids in a situation, and at the end of the day, they are not graduating. And I will say that the National Football League is the best of class. Every single player that plays 3 or more years in the National Football League can leave and get up to $40,000 a year towards his education. It funds a lot of guys that I have helped to get their MBAs, and I'll give them and I'll applaud them publicly for that. But the NCAA is broken, and we need to fix this system.
I respect that.
Okay. Jack, Lou, Clay, thanks for joining us
It's been a
today.
lot of fun, guys. Hey.
And thanks to all of you.
Man, always a pleasure.
Appreciate you joining us, and we'll see you next time and every weekday at noon Eastern with Deep Dive. Thanks.